During my very first week of retirement, my son looked me straight in the eye and said, "We don't need another mouth to feed in this house." Before we go any further, if my story has found you, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to see just how far my words can travel. Then he went ahead and lined up a cleaning job for me. I forced a smile, pretending to agree, while quietly hiding the sting of cold anger behind a mask of calm. But when I never showed up for that job, he realized something important. He had badly underestimated me. And from that moment, his life was never going to be the same. Before I go on, imagine this. Today was my last day at work. I was finally, officially retired. The fork slipped right out of Michael's hand, clattering against his plate. Sarah's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a little circle of surprise. I grinned at both of them, expecting cheers, maybe even a toast with the cheap bottle of wine we saved for special nights. Instead, the silence stretched across our tiny kitchen table like a canyon. Michael recovered first, his face turning red. "What? Dad, you can't just quit like that. Did you even think about what this means?" "Of course I did," I said, my smile faltering. 40 years on the job, son. I earned this. I thought we could celebrate." "Celebrate?" Sarah's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. She set her water glass down with a hard thunk. "Mike, your dad thinks we're just gonna feed him for free." The warmth in my chest started to freeze. This wasn't how I'd pictured the drive home. Smiles, maybe Michael clapping me on the back, telling me he was proud of his old man. Instead, his face twisted into something I'd never seen aimed at me before. Pure annoyance. "Listen, Dad," Michael leaned forward, his tone shifting into his work voice, cold and businesslike. "I'm not carrying an extra mouth to feed. You're getting a job tomorrow. I don't care if it's flipping burgers or stocking shelves, but you're not gonna sit around living off my paycheck." Every word felt like a punch. I stared at the man I'd raised, the one whose college I paid for, whose wedding I helped fund. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look like a stranger. Sarah nodded in agreement. "Robert, you're 65, not 90. Plenty of people your age are still working. My neighbor's dad bags groceries, and he's 73. I started. "You thought wrong," Michael cut me off. "You think money just grows on trees? Do you have any idea what it costs to keep this house going? To feed you, to clothe you? I'm working 50 hours a week at Hartwell Industries just to keep us above water." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me, though they couldn't see it, not yet. My dinner sat untouched. The meatloaf Sarah had made, usually my favorite, now looked sad and cold under the harsh kitchen lights. Everything about the moment felt wrong, warped, like I was looking at my life through a funhouse mirror. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I should have talked to you first." Michael's expression softened slightly, maybe because he thought he'd won. "Look, Dad, I'm not trying to be cruel. But we can't afford a freeloader." That word, dependent, kept echoing in my head as I nodded, playing the part of the scolded father. "I'll think about what you've said." "Good," Sarah replied, briskly clearing the plates. "The sooner, the better." They walked into the living room, and soon I heard the TV come on, their voices returning to normal, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just crushed 40 years of my dreams in under 10 minutes. I stayed at the table for a while, staring at the empty chairs where my family had been just minutes ago. The house settled around me with little creaks, and somewhere outside, a dog barked. Everyday sounds of an ordinary night, but nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. Eventually, I got up and began clearing the dishes. My hands worked on autopilot while my mind replayed every word from dinner. They saw me as a burden. After all the years, all the sacrifices, that's what I was to them. An expense they didn't want. I shut off the kitchen light and headed for my small bedroom in the back of the house, leaving Michael and Sarah to their evening. Tomorrow would bring new truths, but tonight, I needed to think. I lay down on my narrow bed, still dressed, staring at the ceiling as shadows from passing cars drifted across it. The house had gone quiet, but my mind wouldn't rest. 40 years of loyal work, and my own son had called me a freeloader. The room was tiny, just the essentials. A single bed, a nightstand, a dresser that had been around longer than I cared to admit. On top of it sat framed photos. Michael's college graduation, his wedding, Christmas mornings when we all looked happy. Was all of that just a facade? Through the thin wall separating my room from theirs, I heard their voices. At first, it was just muffled murmurs, but soon, the conversation became clear. "I can't believe he just dropped that on us," Michael said, his voice carrying easily through the drywall. "He was talking about me. He thinks he can just sit here and live off my paycheck," he went on. 40 years of work. So what? That doesn't mean he gets to retire on my salary. Sarah's reply was quieter, but still sharp. What if he refuses to work? What if he just sits around watching TV all day? Then we take his pension and put him in a nursing home, Michael said. I'm done supporting dead weight. The words hit me like ice water. Nursing home. Dead weight. My hands clenched the bedsheet until my knuckles went white. He's been freeloading for 2 years, ever since Mom died, Sarah added. Free meals, no rent, and now he doesn't even want to work. He's got some nerve. I thought about all the checks I'd written, $23,000 for his college, $8,000 for his wedding, and the fact that they were living in my house. But none of that seemed to matter to them. The old man has no clue how expensive life is now, Michael said. Utilities, groceries, insurance. He thinks it's still the 50s. Maybe we should give him a deadline, Sarah suggested. 1 week to find a job, or he's out. Perfect, Michael agreed. And if he complains, we'll remind him that beggars can't be choosers. Their laughter trickled through the wall, light, casual, and cruel. I lay there, listening, absorbing every word, every dismissive joke, every cold reminder that they saw me as useless. These were the people I'd given everything for, the family I'd loved without question. The house went quiet again as they got ready for bed. I stayed still, staring into the darkness, realizing the boy I'd once taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees I'd patched, whose fears I'd soothed, now saw me as nothing more than an unwanted bill. A nursing home. The phrase echoed in my head, steady as a drumbeat. They'd already mapped out my exile, decided my future. Take my pension, that modest monthly check that stood for 4 decades of work, and park me in some facility with other cast-off parents. I thought about the people I'd worked alongside. Some of them got gold watches and heartfelt speeches. Jim Thompson's kids bought him a fishing boat. Helen Carter's family threw her a surprise party at the country club. Me. I got threats and ultimatums served with meatloaf. But as I lay there in the dark, something started to rise up under the sting of their words, a cold, calculating anger that caught me off guard with its strength. They wanted to play games with their father's future? They wanted to treat Robert Cook like some helpless old man? Then maybe it was time they learned exactly who Robert Cook really was. I closed my eyes and began to plan. Sleep never came. I just lay there, still, listening as the house settled into silence, my mind replaying decades of sacrifice. The quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, like the air before a storm. 40 years. 40 years of grinding away, saving every spare dime for Michael's future. Double shifts at the factory when he needed schoolbooks, weekend jobs when the college bills rolled in. I remembered living on canned soup so I could cover his tuition at Ohio State University. I remembered the night he called home, panicked about a tuition hike. Don't worry, son, I'd said, already figuring out how many extra hours I'd need to make it work. Your old man will figure it out. And I did, trading my sleep for his dreams, my comfort for his opportunities. His wedding flashed in my mind. Sarah in her white dress, Michael grinning in that rented tux. They never knew their modest budget wedding had quietly doubled in cost, and I'd made up the difference without a word. I watched them dance to music I'd paid for, eat cake I'd financed, celebrate a future I'd made possible. I'd always lived modestly, not because I was broke, but because I chose to. Let them think I was scraping by, while my real investments grew in accounts they never knew existed. Better to be seen as generous than as wealthy, or so I'd believed. My fingers traced the worn bedsheet as I thought of Leonard Hartwell. 25 years ago, when his small manufacturing shop was just an idea in a garage, I'd believed in him. $500,000, hidden as a loan to keep things simple. We shook hands on it, two men betting on a dream. Hartwell Industries now had 3,000 employees across Ohio and Pennsylvania. And here's the kicker. Michael worked for that same company, never knowing his paycheck was partly possible because of the man he now called dead weight. All right, Michael. This game works both ways. The streetlight caught the photo on my nightstand. Michael at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding the baseball glove I'd saved 2 months to buy. That boy had grown into a man who'd threatened to take my pension and ship me off to strangers. But he'd made one big mistake. He'd mistaken kindness for weakness. He thought a simple lifestyle meant I was powerless. Tomorrow, I'd surprise them by agreeing to work. Let them think they'd won. Let them feel superior while I quietly positioned myself exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes the best revenge takes patience, and after 65 years, I'd learned how to wait for the right moment. The clock read 1:23 a.m. In just 6 hours, I'd begin showing my son the difference between charity and vulnerability. He wanted to see his father humbled? Fine. He'd get his wish, right up until the moment he realized who was really holding the cards. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and, for the first time that night, let myself sleep. Morning would bring possibilities, and I intended to be rested for what came next. When I walked into the kitchen the next day, the smell of coffee was already in the air. Michael stood by the counter in his weekend clothes, while Sarah sat at the table buttering toast. Both looked up when I entered, their faces carrying a mix of curiosity and the leftover hostility from last night. "Michael," I began as I took my seat, "I've been thinking about what you said." "You're right." The coffee mug froze halfway to his mouth. Sarah's knife stopped mid-spread, a glob of butter dangling in place. They'd clearly been expecting an argument, more begging about retirement. "Seriously?" Michael set his mug down slowly, suspicion in his voice. "You're not going to fight us on this?" "What would be the point?" I kept my voice calm, even. A man my age should contribute to the household. "I see that now." Sarah glanced at her husband, probably wondering if this was some kind of trap. They'd prepared for a fight and found surrender instead. Michael leaned against the counter, slipping into his manager voice. "Well, since you're being practical, I might have a solution. There's a janitor position open at my company, Hartwell Industries." A smile tugged at the corners of my mouth, but I hid it. "That sounds perfect. I'll take it." "Just like that." Sarah's tone mixed disbelief with a hint of satisfaction. "Honest work is honest work," I replied, looking her straight in the eye. "When would I start?" Michael's chest puffed slightly, enjoying the authority. "Monday morning. 7 a.m. sharp. You'd be ideal, no complaints, follows orders, grateful for the opportunity." He paused, savoring his next line. "The pay's minimum wage, of course. But beggars can't be choosers, right?" There it was again, that phrase they'd laughed about through the wall. I nodded seriously, as if I'd accepted both the job and the insult in equal measure. "I'll have to talk to my boss, Leonard, about approving the hire," Michael continued. "But I'm sure he'll understand. Probably feel sorry for you, actually." Leonard, my oldest friend, my business partner, the man whose garage I'd sat in 25 years ago, mapping out dreams and investments. "That's very kind of you to help arrange this," I said, letting just enough gratitude slip into my voice to make them feel generous. Sarah reached across the table and patted my hand in that slow, condescending way. "See, this wasn't so hard. You just needed to face reality about your situation." My situation. If only she knew. "I appreciate you both helping me understand," I said. "It'll be good to have purpose again, to contribute something meaningful to the family income." Michael nodded with approval. Exactly the attitude we wanted to see. Maybe this will work out after all, Michael said, pulling out his phone, probably to call Leonard about the janitor job. I watched him tap the screen, already picturing Leonard's reaction when he heard this particular request. I'll give him a call this afternoon, Michael said. Get everything set up for Monday. Perfect, I replied, already imagining my first day back at Hartwell Industries. It would be a homecoming, all right, just not the kind Michael was expecting. The conversation drifted into weekend plans and grocery lists, but I barely heard them. My mind was busy charting out Monday morning, down to the minute, already calculating how quickly the truth would start to unravel. Very soon, they'd learn that underestimating Robert Cook was going to be the costliest mistake they'd ever make. Monday arrived crisp and clear. The week between my agreement and today passed in a blur of Michael's smug little preparations. He'd told Leonard, proudly, that he'd solved his father problem, bought me cleaning supplies, and even laid out my duties with barely disguised satisfaction. I played along perfectly, nodding and smiling while counting down to this moment. At 7:30 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, reading the paper. Through the window, I could see neighbors heading to work, their lives going on as usual, unaware of the quiet little revolution brewing inside my house. The bag of cleaning supplies sat untouched by the door, just a prop in the theater of Michael's expectations. The phone stayed silent until 8:15. Then it rang, sharp and loud. "Dad, where are you?" Michael's voice came through tight with panic. My boss just tore me apart. Leonard was waiting for the new janitor, and nobody showed up. "Oh my," I said, letting just the right shade of confusion color my voice. What time was I supposed to be there? 8 o'clock. We talked about this every single day this week. How could you forget? I let a pause stretch, letting his frustration simmer. I'm so sorry, Michael. You know how it is at my age. Sometimes things just slip away from me. This old brain isn't what it used to be. This isn't about your brain, he snapped, voice climbing higher. I vouched for you. I told Leonard you'd be reliable, that hiring family was a smart move. Now I look like a complete fool. Perfect. I could almost see Leonard's face, wondering why Michael was so insistent on hiring an elderly janitor. My old friend was polite, but I knew him well. He'd be clocking the strangeness of this whole setup. I feel terrible about the mix-up, I said, keeping my tone apologetic. What did Mr. Hartwell say? Michael hesitated. He asked why I was so personally involved in the hiring process. I had to explain you were my father, living at home, and needed the work. His voice was heavy with embarrassment. The whole conversation was humiliating. Interesting. Leonard hadn't revealed our connection, not even when faced with such an odd situation. He was probably trying to figure out why Robert Cook's son was offering Robert Cook a janitor job at Robert Cook's own company. Maybe I could come in this afternoon, I suggested, as if trying to make amends. No. Tomorrow. 7:45 sharp. Or else. He cut himself off, probably remembering who he was talking to. Just don't let this happen again, Dad. My reputation is on the line. Of course, son, I said. I understand completely. When the call ended, I leaned back in my chair, coffee still warm in my hand, and let myself savor a slow, deep wave of satisfaction. Phase 1 had gone exactly to plan. Michael was rattled, embarrassed in front of his boss and already questioning whether his father could be trusted. The confident authority he'd built around this whole arrangement was starting to crack. Tomorrow would be Phase 2, but I still had hours to prepare the next surprise. For now, I'd achieved exactly what I'd intended, reminding my son that even when he thought he held all the cards, I could still turn the game on its head. I folded the newspaper and walked toward my computer. Phase 3 would take more groundwork, but the foundation was already in place. The memory of Michael's angry phone call still rang in my ears as I sat down at the small desk in my bedroom, where 2 manila folders waited. I'd been assembling this particular surprise for 2 months, ever since the night I learned Sarah's secret. It had been a cold January afternoon when I first spotted the letterhead, Henderson and Associates, spread across the kitchen counter. Sarah had been careless, leaving work documents right next to her coffee cup while she stepped away to take a call. 40 years of reviewing financial statements had trained my eye, and the moment I scanned those expense reports, something didn't add up. Office supplies, $847.50. Equipment maintenance, $1,134. For a small accounting firm? Those numbers were far too high. I'd managed budgets for decades, and those figures lit up every red flag I had. Interesting, I'd murmured to myself that day, pulling out my phone and quietly photographing each document while Sarah laughed at something in the next room. Why did she have these work documents at home? And why did the numbers look so wrong? That evening, I'd called an old acquaintance, Michael Richardson, a forensic accountant who owed me a couple of favors from the old days. "Michael," I said casually, "could you check something for me at Henderson and Associates?" Completely off the record. I want to know their real office supply expenses for the past 6 months. 3 days later, he'd delivered, quietly sliding the true expense reports across my desk. The comparison was damning. Sarah had been inflating costs and pocketing the difference, month after month. Office supplies that really cost $347 appeared as $847 in her reports. A $534 maintenance bill magically became $1,234. 7 months of careful theft, hidden in plain sight with altered receipts and doctored invoices. Now, sitting at my computer, I opened the 2 folders side by side. On one side, Sarah's falsified documents, photographed right from our kitchen table. On the other, the authentic records Michael had obtained. The pattern wasn't just obvious, it was criminal. I began typing an anonymous email. "Dear Mr. Henderson, I am writing to inform you of serious financial irregularities in your company's expense reporting. Your employee, Sarah Cook, has been systematically embezzling funds by falsifying office supply and maintenance expenses. Please find attached evidence comparing her reported expenses with actual vendor receipts. This pattern spans several months and represents substantial theft. I recommend an immediate investigation and audit of all reports she has submitted. A concerned party." I attached every scanned document, double-checked the anonymous email account I'd created just for this, and hovered my finger over the send button. For a moment, I paused. Sarah would almost certainly be fired, maybe even prosecuted. And Michael? He'd be stuck with an unemployed wife facing criminal charges. Their financial stability was about to crumble. I remembered the sound of their laughter through those thin walls, their casual talk of shipping me off to a nursing home, their easy dismissal of the man who had bankrolled their comfortable lives. My finger pressed the mouse. Send. The email vanished into cyberspace, carrying with it the end of Sarah's career and the beginning of Michael's sleepless nights. Within hours, maybe even by this afternoon, their world would start unraveling from a direction they'd never see coming. I closed the laptop and gathered the physical papers, feeding them into my small shredder one after the other. The evidence had served its purpose. Now it had to vanish completely. Outside, spring sunlight poured into the kitchen, warm and golden. I made myself a sandwich and sat down, content to wait. Soon enough, the consequences would unfold. Michael had wanted to play games with his father's future. Now he'd find out his father had been collecting insurance policies the whole time. The afternoon stretched before me like a blank canvas, waiting for careful brushstrokes. His morning humiliation had been satisfying, but it was only the opening move. Now came the methodical work, the kind that separates a helpless old man from a strategist with 40 years of business experience. In my small study, sunlight slanted across 2 neat stacks of documents. On the left, photocopies of Henderson and Associates expense reports, taken with my phone 2 months ago from our kitchen table. On the right, the authentic records Michael Richardson had discreetly obtained through his network. Side by side, they told a damning story, 8 months of quiet, deliberate theft. I had to give Sarah credit, she'd been clever. Instead of taking big amounts all at once, she'd inflated real expenses by precise percentages. A $347 office supply order became $847, exactly $500 more. Computer equipment costing $1,234 appeared as $1,734. She'd even fabricated vendors, submitting invoices for services that had never happened. I punched the numbers into my calculator. Roughly $18,000 diverted into her personal accounts. Not enough to trigger an automatic audit, but more than enough to explain her designer handbags and weekend shopping sprees that never quite fit her modest salary. I opened my laptop and logged into the anonymous email account I'd set up weeks earlier. The message had to be concerned but professional, detailed enough to demand immediate attention. Dear Mr. Henderson, I am writing to alert you to serious financial discrepancies in your accounting department. Your employee, Sarah Cook, has been systematically embezzling funds through falsified expense reports. The attached evidence shows inflated invoices, fabricated vendor payments, and personal purchases disguised as business expenses. The theft spans January through August 2025 and totals approximately $18,000. I recommend an immediate audit of all expense reports she has submitted, with particular focus on office supplies, equipment maintenance, and consulting fees. A concerned observer. I attached the most incriminating evidence, side-by-side comparisons of Sarah's reports and actual vendor receipts, photos of the suspicious papers she'd left on our kitchen table, and a detailed timeline mapping out the steady escalation of her theft. My finger hovered over the send button. Once this email landed in Henderson and Associates' inbox, Sarah's career would be in shambles within hours. Her professional reputation would be gone. Maybe forever. Criminal charges could follow. Then I remembered her voice through those thin walls. Maybe we should give him a deadline. 1 week to find work or he's out. Her laughter as she talked about taking my pension, as if warehousing me with strangers was a practical solution. I clicked send. The message disappeared into cyberspace, carrying 28 attachments of hard, irrefutable evidence. By tonight, possibly within the next few hours, Sarah would be staring down the consequences of her theft and her cruelty. I closed the laptop and slid the physical papers into my shredder, watching months of work turn into curling ribbons of paper. The evidence had done its job. Now it had to vanish completely. Phase 3 was done. This morning, Michael had been humiliated at work. This afternoon, Sarah's career was crumbling. Tonight, they'd both come home to the man they believed was helpless, never realizing I'd engineered their simultaneous collapse. I made myself tea and settled into my chair, ready to wait for the evening's results. The front door slammed at exactly 6:43 p.m., followed by the sharp, rapid click of heels on the hardwood. I looked up from my evening paper, feigning mild surprise at the urgency in her steps. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face blotchy, mascara smudged into dark shadows under red-rimmed eyes. Her usual polished look was gone, blouse wrinkled, hair slipping from its bun, hands trembling as she gripped her purse. Sarah, what happened? I asked, setting the paper aside and rising halfway from my chair. The picture of concerned father-in-law. Why are you crying? I'm facing termination. The words came out between shaky breaths. Someone sent my boss documents. Financial records. They think I've been stealing. What terrible luck, I murmured, stepping toward her, voice tuned perfectly to convey shock and sympathy. Who could have done such a thing? She dropped into the armchair opposite me, her composure completely shattered. I don't know. Someone anonymous sent Mr. Henderson detailed evidence this afternoon. Bank statements. Expense reports. Everything, laid out like some forensic investigation. I leaned back, keeping my face a mask of bewildered concern, while inside I filed away every word. That sounds devastating. What exactly are they claiming? That I inflated expense reports, created fake invoices, used the company card for personal expenses. Her voice cracked entirely. Robert, they have everything. Dates, amounts, even photographs of documents. Fascinating. Henderson had moved quickly, confronting her within hours of getting my email. A smart businessman, the kind who understood that embezzlement couldn't be ignored. But surely this is some misunderstanding, I said softly. You're an honest person. Anyone who knows you would vouch for your character. That's just it. She leaned forward, eyes wide with panic. The evidence is too detailed. Too specific. Whoever did this has been watching me for months. Documenting everything. It's like they knew exactly what they were looking for. Indeed they did, I thought, though out loud I simply asked, "Have you told Michael yet?" letting just enough worry color my voice. Her face crumpled even more. No, how can I? He's already stressed about work, about you missing your first day. She looked up at me, eyes wide and pleading. Robert, what am I going to do? If they fire me, if there are criminal charges, we'll lose everything. Now, I said soothingly, giving her shoulder a gentle, grandfatherly pat. We'll figure this out together. Family supports family, right? The irony wasn't lost on me. The same woman who'd laughed about shipping me off to a nursing home was now looking to me for comfort. They've suspended me pending a full investigation, she said, dabbing at her nose with a tissue. Mr. Henderson told me the evidence was too strong to ignore. They're bringing in outside auditors, going through every transaction I've touched in the past year. External auditors. Michael Richardson had done his job flawlessly. The authentic records he'd provided would line up perfectly with the anonymous allegations I'd sent. Is there any way this could be handled quietly? I asked, keeping my voice carefully helpful. Maybe if you spoke to Mr. Henderson directly, explained your side of things? My side. She gave a short, bitter laugh. What side? The documents don't lie, Robert. Someone has built an airtight case against me, and I have no idea who or why. The sound of Michael's car pulling into the driveway cut through the tension. We both heard the front door open, his footsteps crossing the porch. Please, Sarah whispered urgently. Let me tell him myself. He's going to be devastated. I gave her a sympathetic nod, settling back into my chair to watch the evening's final act unfold. From the entryway came his voice. Sarah? Dad. I'm home. Heavy footsteps thudded down the hallway, each one weighted with the exhaustion of a long day. When Michael appeared in the doorway, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled, his expression shifted from tired irritation to sudden alarm. What did you do to her, old man? He dropped his briefcase and went straight to Sarah, who was still dabbing at her tear-streaked face. I walk in to find my wife crying, and you're just sitting there like nothing's wrong? Michael, I didn't do anything, I said evenly, holding my ground. Don't lie to me. His voice spiked. First you embarrass me at work by not showing up, now you've upset Sarah. What is wrong with you? Sarah lifted a hand weakly. Chris, please. It's not your father. Then what is it? He turned on her, slipping fully into that clipped manager tone he used on subordinates. Why are you crying? What happened? They want to fire me. The words tumbled out in a rush. Someone sent anonymous evidence to Mr. Henderson, claiming I've been embezzling money. They've suspended me while they investigate. The color drained from Michael's face. He stood frozen, as if someone had just cut the power to his body. Embezzling, he said finally, sinking into the nearest chair. The anger was gone, replaced with stunned disbelief. That's impossible. You're the most honest person I know. That's what I tried to tell them, Sarah said quickly, finding strength in his defense. But whoever sent this information knew exactly what to look for, Sarah said, voice trembling. They had copies of expense reports, bank records, everything perfectly documented. I watched Michael's face cycle through emotions, confusion, denial, then a growing panic as it all sank in. His father skipping work. His wife facing criminal charges. Everything spinning out of his control. This can't be happening, he muttered, dragging both hands through his hair. Not now. Not when everything else is falling apart. What do you mean, Everything else? Sarah asked, briefly pulled out of her own crisis. Michael's eyes locked on me, sharp with resentment. My father here decided to play games yesterday. Didn't show up for work after I personally vouched for him to my boss. Made me look like an amateur. That was just confusion about the time, I began, but he cut me off. No more excuses. He shot to his feet, finger stabbing the air in my direction. Tomorrow, you're coming to work with me. No tricks. No senior moments. No nonsense. I'm driving you there myself to make sure you show up. Michael, that's not necessary. And no games, he snapped, voice cracking with a mix of fury and desperation. I've had it with both of you making trouble. My reputation, my marriage, my whole life is under attack, and I'm not letting it happen. Sarah's gaze flicked between us, her confusion growing as she tried to process this family collision while still reeling from her own disaster. Don't worry, son, I said quietly, meeting his blazing stare with a calm that seemed to unsettle him. Today, everything will be different. Something in my tone made him pause. For a brief moment, his rigid stance faltered as he searched my face for meaning. It better be, he said finally, his voice dropping to a low, deliberate threat. Because if it's not, if you embarrass me one more time, I'll follow through on every word I've said. Nursing home, pension, all of it. Do you understand me? I nodded solemnly, suppressing the faint smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Tomorrow will be different, all right. More different than Michael could possibly imagine. The house sank into a tense silence. 3 people, each facing their own crisis, none of them realizing they all traced back to the same hand. Morning came too soon for Michael, but I'd slept like a man with nothing to worry about. After all, this was the final act of a play I'd been scripting for months. I dressed slowly, methodically, pulling on the work clothes he'd bought me, each piece part of the costume for my best performance yet. Michael was already in the kitchen when I walked in, hunched over a mug of coffee like it might keep him upright. The dark circles under his eyes, the unshaven stubble, the tight jaw, he looked like a man ready to fix his life by brute force. Ready? He asked sharply, skipping any kind of greeting. Ready, I replied, slipping on the jacket that completed my janitor's uniform. The drive to Hartwell Industries began in silence. For the first 10 minutes, the crush of morning traffic gave Michael something to pour his tension into, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching familiar streets slide past, ticking down the minutes until everything changed. Let's make something crystal clear, he said finally, voice low and hard. Today there will be no confusion about the time. No mysterious illnesses. No convenient memory lapses. You will show up, you will work, and you will make me look competent in front of my boss, Michael said, his voice low and sharp. I understand completely, I replied, keeping my tone properly submissive. Do you? He shot me a sideways glance. Because yesterday's stunt nearly cost me my job. Leonard was asking pointed questions about my judgment, about why I was vouching for unreliable people. I had to convince him to give you another chance. Poor Leonard. I could only imagine his confusion, trying to work out why his business partner's son was so determined to hire his business partner for menial labor. And let's have no tricks, Michael continued, his confidence growing with each word. I know you. I know you think you can turn every situation to your advantage, but those days are over. From now on, I'm in charge. Don't worry, son, I said, letting just a trace of something else, something unreadable, slip into my tone. Today, everything will be different. He looked over sharply, catching a note in my voice that didn't match the obedient father he expected. What's that supposed to mean? Just that I understand the situation better now, I answered evenly. Sometimes it takes time to see things clearly. The Hartwell Industries building came into view, a sleek expanse of glass and steel, 25 years removed from Leonard's garage. Michael had driven past it countless times, never knowing his father had helped make it possible. There it is, he said, pride mixing with nerves. 3,000 employees. multi-million-dollar operation. This is where real men work, Dad. This is what success looks like. Indeed it was. And today, Michael was going to learn just how much of that success had his own blood in it. We pulled into the lot, Michael parking near the main entrance. As he shut off the engine, I noticed his hands trembling, whether from anger, exhaustion, or dread, I couldn't be sure. "Remember," he said, fixing me with a look of fierce determination. "Whatever happens in there, you follow my lead. I do the talking. You stay quiet, respectful, grateful for the opportunity." "Of course," I agreed, suppressing a smile at the irony of being given instructions for walking into my own company. Michael got out, waited for me on the sidewalk, and together we approached the glass doors. The final act of our family drama was just minutes away. The lobby doors parted with a soft hiss, revealing the gleaming marble floors I hadn't walked in months. Michael strode ahead confidently, nodding to the security guard, who waved us through without question. Another quiet irony, since I had been part of designing those very protocols. "Stay close and keep quiet," Michael murmured. "I'll handle the talking." The main corridor buzzed with morning energy, employees clutching coffee cups, swapping updates, hurrying toward meetings. I recognized more than a few faces, though none gave the old man in the janitor's uniform a second glance. Michael ducked into the supply closet, returned with a mop and bucket, and shoved them into my hands with barely concealed satisfaction. "Here. Make it look authentic when Leonard sees you." I took the mop and bucket without a word, inwardly amused at the theatricality of this last act. Around us, the heartbeat of my company went on, reports reviewed, deals decided, profits earned from investments I'd helped seed decades ago. "There he is," Michael breathed, straightening his tie and slipping into his most polished demeanor. Leonard Hartwell came down the corridor on his usual morning rounds, silver hair immaculate, tablet in hand. At 64, he carried the quiet authority of a man who had built something great and knew it. "Mr. Hartwell," Michael called, infusing his voice with just the right level of respectful enthusiasm. "Perfect timing, sir." Leonard looked up, at first distracted, then focused on Michael with polite attention. His gaze flicked over to me, just another janitor, or so he thought, and then stopped dead. "Michael." Leonard's voice slowed, touched with confusion. "You brought him here?" "Yes, sir." Michael's chest expanded with pride. "I solved our staffing problem and my family situation at the same time. Here's my father, the janitor." The words seemed to hang in the air like a challenge to the laws of nature. People moved past us, unaware of the storm about to break in the middle of their workday. Leonard's expression shifted, recognition, disbelief, then a cold, controlled fury that seemed to pull the heat from the hallway. "Michael," he said, voice low and dangerous, "do you have any idea what you've just done?" "Sir." Michael's confidence faltered. "You brought Robert Cook, one of the largest shareholders in this company, into my building with a mop in his hands, and you're standing here proud of yourself." The color drained from Michael's face so fast I thought he might collapse. His mouth opened and closed uselessly, like a fish gasping for air. "That's impossible," he whispered. 25 years ago," Leonard continued, his voice now rising, "your father invested $500,000 in my startup. Without him, there would be no Hartwell Industries. Without him, there would be no job for you to lose, which you just did." I don't understand." "Then let me be clear, you're fired. Effective immediately." Leonard's words cut through the corridor like a blade. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. "Clear out your office. Security will escort you out." Michael stood frozen as his world collapsed in on itself, fast and precise as a controlled demolition. His briefcase slipped from limp fingers, striking the marble floor with a sharp crack that echoed in the stunned silence. Leonard turned to me, concern softening his tone. "Robert, my friend, what on earth is going on here?" I set down the mop, straightened to my full height, and let the submissive act fall away. When I spoke, my voice carried the authority and sharpness I'd kept tucked away for days. "Leonard." I think we should have a private conversation in your office. His executive suite was just as I remembered, rich mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, walls lined with plaques, awards, and photographs chronicling 25 years of shared victories. And in more than a few of those pictures, Leonard and I stood side by side, smiling at milestones Michael had never even known existed. Evidence of a partnership Michael had never known existed surrounded him on the walls. He followed us into Leonard's office like a man in a daze, his face still pale from the hallway revelation. Without asking, he dropped into one of the leather chairs, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "Robert, please sit," Leonard said, gesturing to the seat across from his desk. The same chair where I'd sat countless times, discussing strategy and shaping the company's future. Then Leonard's gaze shifted between us. "Now, can someone explain why my business partner was just introduced to me as a janitor by his own son?" I settled into the familiar seat, feeling the weight of my charade lifting. "Leonard, my family has been under the impression that I'm financially dependent on them. They've been less than charitable in their assessment of my worth." "Less than charitable?" Leonard's voice sharpened as he turned to Michael. "Your father owns 37% of this company. He's been drawing dividends for decades, not because he needs the money, but because that's how investments work. What exactly did you think he did for a living?" Michael's reply was barely a whisper. "Factory work. Manual labor. I thought he was poor." "Poor?" Leonard gave a short, humorless laugh. "Your father could buy and sell half of Portland's business district. He chose to live modestly. Chose to let you believe he was struggling. And apparently, chose to let you treat him like a burden." The truth hung between us, 25 years of hidden success, finally in the open. Through the windows, the city skyline stretched out before us, a view I'd helped Leonard afford with my first investment, and everyone since. "But why?" Michael asked, finally meeting my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to see what kind of man you'd become without the shadow of money," I said calmly. "I wanted to know if you'd respect your father for who he was, not what he owned. The answer, sadly, is no." Leonard leaned back, his expression turning cold. "So let me get this straight. You learned your father retired, and your first move was to force him into menial labor?" "We couldn't afford," Michael began. "You couldn't afford?" Leonard's voice rose. "Your father has supported you your entire adult life. College tuition, wedding expenses, the down payment on your house. All paid from his share of this company's profits. And you repaid that generosity by threatening to put him in a nursing home." Michael's face collapsed under the weight of it. "I didn't know. Nobody told me." "Nobody told you to be decent to your father either," I said quietly. "That should have come naturally." Leonard moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Robert, what do you want me to do here?" "Nothing that hasn't already been done," I said. "His employment here is over, as you've already made clear. His wife is facing criminal charges for embezzlement. That's a separate matter. Justice has been served." Michael's head snapped up. "You knew about Sarah?" "I know about everything, son," I said, rising to my feet. "I always have. The question now is, what will you do with that knowledge?" The room went quiet except for the faint hum of business continuing on the floors below. Leonard crossed to me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Robert, you'll always be welcome here. This is your company as much as mine." "Thank you, Leonard. But I think it's time I truly retired, on my own terms." I looked at Michael one last time. "Maybe this will teach you something about respect, humility, and the difference between being poor and choosing to live simply." He opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. There were no words that could erase what had been done. As we stepped out of Leonard's office, he held the door for me. "Justice has been restored," he said simply. "Indeed, it has." After days of humiliation, threats, and pretense, I stood once more as I truly was. Not a burden, not a charity case, but Robert Cook. Businessman. Respected partner. A man who had always known the true value of dignity. The week I retired ended exactly as it should, truth revealed, respect reclaimed, and justice served. And if my story stayed with you, tap that like button and subscribe. It lets me know you're here, and it helps this story reach the people who might need it most.